Welcome to another session of Step into the Black Light. I am your host, Michael Markman, and today I have the honor of introducing someone who has been a mentor to me for a good part of my life. He is a master teacher, an administrator, philosopher, historian, griot, professor, who's been featured in the films Out of Darkness and Hidden Colors. I want to introduce to the light, Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene. Hotep, my brother, how are you?
Hotep to you, my brother, Art Man. Everything is excellent. Taking it day by day and step by, because I go back that far with you, brother, to the Art Man stage.
That's right. Not many people know about that.
No doubt, brother. I remember the day I met you in Brother Charles Barron's office.
Absolutely.
That's where I first met
you. This is before dynamics of leadership. This is before he was an assemblyman or in the city council.
Oh yeah.
And that's where it all starts.
Oh,
we all have visions that day.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
And life has brought us on a wonderful journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say again, I am blessed to have known you and had you in my life. You've educated me, you've inspired me, but you've not only done that for me, I'm sure you have done that, and I know you have done that for people all over this planet. And on behalf of everyone you have touched, thank you, brother. Thank you. So what you been up to, my brother? What's been on your agenda? What have you been working on lately?
The most current is the completion of my second book, Spirituality Before Religions. And I've developed a 12-part webinar series once a month. And this Sunday, we will have our 10th webinar. And that's really what I've been focusing on, along with my online class, the Kemetic Wisdom School, and also meeting and greeting many folk doing programs such as this type of program on Zoom. Because of the conditions we're under, the digital nomics has really taken off, and there's a lot that's going on now. And I've attempted in every opportunity I have to get online with folks such as yourself who are doing the program, who is doing the work to bring the knowledge to our community. And so that's what I've been doing, brother. What was interesting is I retired from the New York City Board of Education in July of 2009. So, like, as you can see, I'm in my 12th year, but I am busier now than I've ever been in my life. And
I would probably say that has to do with your wings. You can take off now. You can fly now.
I tell folk, brother Art Man, I am now doing what I was born to do. Everything I did before that was to get me ready.
That's right.
That's why I tell folk about the word retirement. Be careful.
Yes.
I spell retirement R-I-P. When you put that dust on me 6 feet under, that's when I retired. Until then, I'm ascending in life and doing the work that our creator and ancestors has given to me, but ancestors give it to us all. Yes. And that's what I've been doing, brother. I've stayed busy because now I can do what I want to do.
Right. So speaking of education, this week we are covering Education Week and Step into the Black Light. So we just had to get you a master teacher here and an administrator. But I've always been curious. I never asked you this, so I'm going to ask you this now. What propelled you to get into the field of education?
My brother, that's a very interesting question, because I thought I was going to do it in communications. I got my bachelor's degree from New York University in international studies with a minor in Caribbean and South American studies with a focus on revolution. That's my educational background up until I graduated from college. But I was also in college radio. I was also an intern at the radio station here in New York, WWRL. And
yes.
Yeah, I mean, that was the all-black AM station, brother.
Wasn't Larry Bird? Wasn't Brother Bird on there at one time?
When I was an intern, I was an intern in
1978.
I remember Gary Bird when the GBE was not the Global Black Experience.
Yes.
Gary Bird experience.
All right. Okay, we're going back now.
Oh, yeah, man. Bob Law was the director of community affairs.
Right.
My My mentor, if I can use that word, was Bobby J, who was the assistant director. Sonny Taylor was the director. He was the program director. Bobby J was the assistant director. The brother that came up on board right after Bobby J was Jeffrey Troy. I was there when Hank Spann was there. This is a golden age in radio. This is the beginning of hip hop, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
This is where hip hop is now taking form in New York City and in the Bronx. And I felt that my contribution was going to be through communications. And so through WWRL internship, they notified me and said that there was a newly purchased Black-owned radio station in Gary, Indiana, and that there was a Black bank, Seaway Bank, that had purchased it. And they needed a production manager and a weekend disc jockey. They said, "Are you interested in coming out here?"
Mm.
And I had friends that had that lived in Gary, Indiana. And we were in the military together. So I had friends that I at least could start the process. So I started. I was production manager and I was disc jockey, but my job was in the afternoon. My production job was from 4 to about 10, where I did commercials and, you know, back in the day with video cassette, audio cassette. My weekend disc jockey was Saturday and Sunday all day, from open to close.
Mm.
The teacher of radio and television in the all-Black high school, Roosevelt High School in Gary, Indiana, went on sabbatical. He went on leave for a year. And they asked me, would I be interested in teaching radio and television?
Wow. Okay.
And so I said, because my days were open, you know, I was open until 4, and I could even come in at 5 if I wanted to. Because I had jobs to do, and as long as I did the job, they didn't care when I came in.
Right.
But I took the job, and I taught radio and television.
Wow.
Now, keep in mind, you know, you have Don Cornelius just going to California to start the syndicated Soul Train, but before that, it came out of Chicago.
Right.
So they had a local Soul Train, which stayed what it was, but not with Don Cornelius. They had another MC there, and then Don went out to Los Angeles. So my radio and television class, man, I was able to put it together. I was in my early 20s. I was a young brother. I could identify with a lot of the students, and they could identify with me. And so I taught sophomore, junior, and senior radio and television.
Wow.
And right around November, I had a student come to me. Now, let me tell you about the student. The student came to class every day. It was a brother. Came to class every day. Came to class with impeccable dress, tie, shirt, nice clothing. Was always respectful. Was always there when the class began, and did all of his homework and did it well. And one day in November, around the Misgiving holiday, some people call it Thanksgiving, around the Misgiving holiday, he came to me with an excuse. This was going to be the first time he was going to be absent from class. He said, "I just want you to know that I'll be absent, and I just want you to know why." And he showed me this, and he was going to court for accomplice to murder.
Oh my God. Wow.
And I looked at the brother and I said, "Brother, wow." I said, you are my best student.
Wow.
You're the best student I have in all of my classes. You present yourself with respect and dignity. You dress with respect and dignity. What's up? He said, "Well, you know, it happens sometimes. Things happen." And I said, wow, I just was taken back. And I said, "Well, brother, let me ask you this." I said, "You're my best student. You do everything that I ever ask a student to do and more." Because sometimes he'd hang around and talk to me. I said, "You are always in class, second period," because it was second period, "and you always are on target." He said, "But, you know, I'll tell you, Mr. Coleman, your class is the only class I come to."
Wow.
I said, I come in second and I leave before third.
Wow.
And I said to him, "Brother, why?" He said, "You know something? I honestly believe that you respect me." Brother, I was making 5 times the amount in communications and radio, 5 times the amount. Back then in 77, I was making $55,500 a
Yeah, that's
year.
a lot of money back then. Yeah,
Back then, $55,000 is a
you were
lot
straight.
of
You were
money.
straight. Yeah.
Okay, that was 1/5 of what I got paid for in teaching.
Wow.
But Brother Artman, that young brother so impacted me by his statement. That was my epiphany.
Wow.
I went in and I told the program director, I said, I got to go. And he was just, because in radio, the thing, particularly back then, the one thing to always remember is that the one thing you want is your first job. Once you break through with your first job, your career is settled. Because radio stations will always go in after the ones that are already there.
Right.
It's
established.
right. Being able to break through.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and at that time, remember, Tom Joyner was in Chicago with JPC. They were calling me, interested in me doing something in Chicago.
Wow. And he was already, he was syndicated by then too, right?
Well, they didn't have necessarily syndication like that, like they have today. But he was well known around the country. He was their main disc jockey at JPC, Johnson Public.
Right.
And I was in negotiations with going to Chicago. There was a jazz station right outside Gary, WWDJ, that was a jazz station. They invited me to be a part of it. When I went in and told them I was leaving radio, they made me write a resignation letter because they said, nobody would believe that you're doing this. And personally, I think you're crazy. But that's what got me into education. By December, and to show you how deep it was, I was planning on continuing teaching at Roosevelt High School. But they contacted the teacher of European descent that had gone on sabbatical. And they said, look, the teacher that took your place unexpectedly has gained a lot of respect from the students. And if you don't come back, because he took a year off, because it was high school, he took a year off. They said, if you don't come back, we can guarantee you your job, but I can't guarantee you radio and television. So he cut his sabbatical in half and came back.
Wow.
And then they removed me because of my relationship with the students. It was very powerful, man.
I can only imagine.
I mean, I became the faculty advisor for the roller skating team. I became the faculty advisor for the junior class. And that was only a matter of a month. But what I saw, Brother Artman, and to answer your question, there was such a natural relationship I had with students. It far outweighed my desire for money and for getting into radio. But if you ask me what changed me, what got me into education, it was that student that told me, I honestly believe that you respect me.
Wow.
And he wanted to be around that type of environment. Even though once he left, he got into his thing. If he did, I don't know. Because I was never around, because I returned back to New York and started teaching as of October of '79. I went via Washington, D.C., spent a year in D.C., came back to New York and started teaching in South Central Bronx, October of '79, and I retired in July of '09. And I walked through education that way. But the point that I'm making, Brother Artman, is that what got me into education was not some divine desire to be a teacher, even though my name was Booker T. And the first thing Dr. Clark told me when he met me when I was 12 and a half, he said, oh, Booker T, you're going to be a great
teacher. You destined with that name.
And I just, I said, I don't think so.
Right.
But, I respect you. But I went another route.
But you know what's interesting is you said you wanted to be in communications. You are in communications.
Exactly.
You are in communications.
Exactly.
So sometimes we have goals for ourselves, but the ancestors and the spirit within us takes us in the direction we need to be taken in to uplift ourselves and our people.
Absolutely.
And thank God and thank the creators that you had the wherewithal to know that you have to follow the calling.
Absolutely.
And you did. And the changes you made in education were phenomenal, I wanted to just follow that question up with what were some of the challenges over the years you faced in in schools, especially public schools?
Well, you know, it was a mixed blessing for me because I was, again, following the ancestors and the creator's direction and being obedient from an internal, from when I moved into education because of this young brother. I've always felt divinely directed. I'm not talking about religious. I'm
Right.
just talking about a respect for that inner voice that I hear talking to me frequently.
Mm.
That's telling me, you know, do this or do that or do it this way or do it that way. And I've always been blessed because I would not have been able to do what I did if I had not met the people in my life that I met.
Mm.
For instance, I started teaching as a gym teacher in New York. Again, another teacher went on sabbatical and I took their place. I was a gym teacher.
Mm.
The next year, I was just a rotating substitute teacher. And I was in it was CES 70 in the Bronx. And 70 was such a big school. It had 10 classes on each grade from 1 to 5, or from 1 to 6. So there was 60 classes in this building. And it also had an Olympic pool, the only one with an Olympic pool. And they brought me in to start a swimming class because of my background in swimming. But the problem was the Board of Ed has very stringent rules when it comes to phys ed. My background was in international politics. It wasn't in phys ed. So I did not have the requirements as
Right.
that to be a swim teacher.
Right.
But it was a huge school and they had 10 classes. And so again, I'm a sabbatical and the principal was very interested in my work and what I did. He hired me. And the next year, when the teacher came back to teach gym, he said, come every day because one of these 60 teachers is going to be absent every day. So I can almost guarantee you that you're going to have a job at least
Right.
every day, which I did. But he also put my list on the rotating list of available teachers.
Right. Right.
And I was hired for a school where the principal, in a very interesting way, sister, had 2 sons. I fit in between them too. I fit directly in between age-wise between the two. I was a year younger than her older son and a year older than her younger son. Neither of them got into education. So in a sense, she saw me as the son she never had.
Okay. Right.
Okay. At the same time, my mother joined the ancestors.
Okay.
So there was also this fulfillment of her almost being a mother figure.
Right.
And so the dynamics of what she allowed me to do, she would become superintendent of the district
Wow.
and she would bring me with her. So I went from a substitute teacher to a teacher of African studies. She let me teach African history, not African American history, African history. I taught African history. I taught kindergarten through 4th grade. I then became her administrative assistant, and then I became the assistant principal. She then became superintendent. I then became executive assistant to the superintendent.
Wow.
That was my segue from being in a school to a district of 35 schools. She allowed me to implement programs in the Black Studies Department, the Black Heritage Committee, I should say. And so my experiences grew there. Now, to go back to your challenges, my challenges came from the principals that could not handle me.
And when you say that, what do you mean could not handle you? What you doing that was so terrible?
I was teaching African studies. I was teaching cultural education. I was teaching Latinx studies, if you want to call it that. Back then it was Hispanic heritage. I was teaching Native American history. I was teaching what happened during enslavement. And there were principals that told me, I'll never let you in my school.
Oh my.
You say, this is one school you'll never get in. Wow. But you see, what she didn't know, because of, Dr. Clark often told me, he said, always know the difference between people in powerful positions and people in positions of power. Okay. The powerful position is the superintendent, but the position of power was in the community school board.
Right.
So I was able to get out of 9 members, because back then, remember, it was decentralized. Back then, I had 5 board members that really respected my work. And I had 4 that didn't want anything to do with it. But I had a quorum.
Mm.
So that the 4 that didn't care for me, if they wanted anything passed, you better not get on me.
Right.
So I got a lot of things that I wanted. See, this is where the blessings and other things come into existence, because later on down the line, when I lost my 5-person quorum, they removed me almost immediately. But it was towards the end of my career. It was the last 7 years of my career.
You had done the work you needed to do.
Absolutely. Because I told people all the time, Brother Artman, if you're going to get me, you needed to get me by 1995.
And they didn't do that.
No, I went to 2002.
You had already made your mark.
I had made my mark. I had met all of my check marks that I wanted to do in curriculum development and staff development. I worked on the federal government level. I was one of the developers of the first social studies test for the state of New York. I worked for the city system. I worked for districts. I had created a reputation where people understood who I was and the work that I was doing. This is how Charles and I first met.
Mm-hmm.
I bought 50 copies of his book on Marcus Garvey.
Wow. Okay. Right. Okay. I remember
And
that
then
book.
brother called me because he saw this order, and he and I started talking.
Wow.
And he told me about the dynamics of leadership. And I brought him in to do series of presentations on, but at the time he had this program he called Speak Out.
Yes, I remember that. Right.
And that's what I brought him into the district to develop a language, a language program to learn how to teach oral presentations.
Right. Because he trained people in public speaking.
That's exactly it.
And I went through some of his training as well. It was dynamic, very dynamic.
And I brought him in front of kindergarten. I brought him in front of 5- and 6-year-olds to teach them how to present themselves. And he had that where you own your space and you talk. And he said, give a hand clap. And you know how Charles did his thing. But in that program is how I met Charles Barron.
Wow.
By bringing him to District 9. And Charles and I used to walk the district. When he would come in, I would go with him to the different schools to support what he was doing. I didn't want him to go in alone and then principals going to come in on him.
Right.
I wanted to be there to let them know I represent the superintendent. You start funny business, I'm going back to talk to her.
Right.
And so I would go, and Charles and I would walk along the Grand Concourse, East Tremont. We would be up on Webster Avenue. We would go all over the Bronx.
Wow.
And that's the type of program that I had. So when I tell you about the problems they had with me, imagine Charles and I walking into a school building together.
I can only imagine.
and you know, you got the same people that marched on January 6th. We had some principals that was on the same mindset.
But even on another level, they fear our greatness.
Absolutely.
They fear our courage and our strength and our conviction.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
all they can do is try to tear it down.
Absolutely.
They're not going to accept it, so they have to tear it down. And you were 2 very dynamic and powerful, educated brothers. They couldn't argue with your knowledge.
No,
they couldn't argue with your knowledge. All they could do is try to stagnate what you were doing. But you're not the kind of individuals that allow that to happen.
Not at all. Well, you know what I did is I brought Charles in. You know, because as you know, in a school you go in, first thing you do. Well, nowadays, because security is the first desk that you go to. You explain to them what you're going to do. At this time, we didn't have security in schools like this. We had an office worker that was at the door.
Well, there was no security at the desk?
No. At this time, security wasn't the way it is now. There was no security. Normally, it was an office worker. It was a classroom helper. It could have been a number of, but it was normally somebody that was not a teacher, but it wasn't security. I brought Charles into the principal's office. We would sign in the book. I introduced Charles to the principal and explained to him. Charles would give them the work that he was doing with the children. We did it very fair and square, but they'd be looking at me like, only because it's you, man, because if it was anybody else. But when you asked what kind of things I came up against, it was those undercurrents. But you see, I understood the difference between people in powerful positions and positions of power. And so what I went after is the people that had the power, not the powerful position. Because in a school building, the principal you would think is the most powerful person in the building. It's not. It's the custodial engineer.
They run the show. They got the keys. They run the boiler room.
Absolutely. And
They can shut you down.
That's it. That's what a custodial engineer can do. Custodial engineer can go in and tell a principal, look, we got to shut the building down.
Yeah.
No matter
We got
what
weather problems, we got issues. That's right.
And a custodial engineer's salary is equivalent to the principal and one assistant principal.
Look at that. Look at that.
They have a separate budget.
That's right.
Nutritional staff has a separate budget.
Right.
So some of my advantages being in the positions that I've been in, brother, was I learned the system.
Right.
I learned how the system worked from the top as it relates, and also I learned the business of education. That's how I was able to bring Charles in.
That's right.
I knew how to fill out purchase orders. I knew how to follow the rules. And what's interesting is that there was a business manager in our district who was a man of European descent. And when I got on to the district level, he had known me from when I was an assistant principal. And he told me one day when I was in a school as the assistant principal, he said, come around after school. I want to talk to you. And I went. This man signs off on all business deals. And he said, you know, I really respect you. He said, I'm Jewish. He said, and I'm proud to be Jewish. I don't mean no harm to nobody else, but I'm proud to be Jewish. And he said, I respect your pride in being Black and how you present yourself. He said, the purchase orders, I want to teach you the business of education. He said, I want you to come in, and here's the dates I'm available and the hours. And I used to go sit with him, and he taught me the business of education, how to do purchase orders, how to do RFPs, requests for funding, RFPs. He taught me how to create school programs and put a budget in where you can get the people you want. He taught me how to word it. He taught me words. And he also respected that I was there every time he asked. He told me he was free. I was there until his time was up, never went beyond the time, never went before the time. I was there outside his door when he said, and I learned the system. And now, Brother Artman, I tell people, I'm the spook who sat by the classroom door.
That's right. and you have started and propelled a revolution of the mind for our people. You know, the first time I visited you in a school, I was a young teacher. And you were in the Bronx. You remember that day?
I remember it.
And I came into your room, and you know, I'm an artist, so I was mesmerized. I looked up in the ceiling. You had the celestial bodies. Yeah. You had crystals. You had glass pyramids. I mean, I learned as soon as I walked in your room, you know, and I don't know if I've ever told you, but I have modeled every room and environment I've taught in by what I saw there.
Wow.
So I know why you did that, but I want you to elaborate on why you did that. And then if you could also tie into what that does for our children and what they're missing in education that you try to provide and that young teachers need to provide today for our children.
There is something that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I learned. That's what I meant when I said, if they were going to get me, they have to get me by 95. Because I got into that position and I got into that building at the end of 1989, going into 1990. Again, the principal that was in the school was a sister from Brooklyn. She was dynamic. Sister had dreadlocks. Sister believed in culture. And when I went in to meet her, and by this time the superintendent had changed, but this superintendent was as supportive as the other one in other ways. I mean, he gave me $250,000 to put my program together. And he used to always say, my nickname is Skip. He used to always say, Skip, take it and run with it. All the time. And when he became superintendent, because he used to be in charge of the numbers. He was a brilliant mathematician, and he was in charge of looking at the numbers of, in other words, he was director of statistics. And he sent me to this school, and he said, "Is that the school?" I said, "Well, doctor, I want to go into the most challenged school." District 9 was the most challenging district in the city. The school I went to was the most challenged school in the district, because my thing was, I have a big mouth. I tell people what culture will do. I tell people, like Wade Noble says, culture is to a human like water is to a fish.
Mm.
We swim in it, we live in it, we eat in it, we drink in it, we exist in it. Culture, the cultural common sense as a people. And so what I was able to do and what I wanted was, in that money that the superintendent gave me, I painted that room myself. I painted the garbage can. I painted the file cabinet red, black, and green.
I didn't see that. I missed that one. I was looking at the sky.
Yeah.
I was looking at the stars. I missed that.
Exactly. And those stars illumined, and I painted that wall black.
It's incredible. Incredible.
And what I did was, I developed and understood that with children, and I know you know what I'm talking about, the visual, the image is very important. The perceptual world is very important. And I painted that classroom in the colors of the rainbow. And I started east, and that eastern wall that you saw with the stars, that was east. And then around the room, in a counterclockwise, I painted it according to the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and then it returned back to ultraviolet. And that's how I painted the room. Mm-hmm. I had a contract with a company in Wisconsin that had books with plush animals that went with it. I had Your Mama is a Llama, and I had the book, and then I had the llama. And I had a book on gorillas, I had a book on giraffes, I had a book, all African animals, and then I had books that went with them. And the children naturally gravitated towards the plush animals, but sitting on top, the plush animals sat on top of the book. And so as the children came in to see the plush animal, they would pick up the plush animal, see the book, and then they would pick up the book. Mm. The images all around the room of the Medunetta, of all of Asar and Heru and all of the different statues. I had indigenous statues. I had dream catches, and I had a 6-foot gorilla that I used to sit in my seat when I wasn't at my desk.
And what was the significance of that?
The children, when they saw that gorilla, they would want to come in. I had children from the special ed classes come in. What I also did was because that room was a resource center for the social studies department. I had teachers come from different schools because I had maps that they just did not have and they couldn't afford. But I could order it, and I could get a lot of them free to test, because I reached out to all of the different companies, Macmillan and all the other types of McGraw-Hill, and asked for samples. So I had samples of every book in social studies, geography, politics, economics, and I got it for free. And I used to have classes come in to let the teacher teach her class or his class using my materials. And I'd be at my desk doing work because I was a district office, but I was in a junior high school.
Right. They have so many terms now today that relate to what you're doing, what you did. STEAM, STEM, interdisciplinary, multiple intelligences. Well, you had all of that in your midst. What effect did that have on the psyche and the children's education level? How did you see it affected them in the classroom? How did it affect their maybe their test scores and their ability to excel?
I approached it from a perspective of where they were coming from. Brother, I approach people, even those who are watching what we are doing now, even you, where you are right now. I already know you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And so my level of conversation and my direction as it relates to my words is not like I'm putting something in your head. It's like I'm drawing something out of you that you already know.
Mm.
So the way in which I even address my students is like this. And this is how I tell the story. Imagine that all the lights are out. You can't see anything. And then all of a sudden you find the light switch and you turn the light switch on and you see the table, the chairs, the lamps, the television, the artwork on the wall. My question to you is, did all those things appear in the room when you turned the light on? No, they were always there. Your light just wasn't on.
You didn't see. All right.
So the way in which I approach teaching is not so much to be those parts in the room as much as it is the directing force that assists you in finding the light switch in your mind to come to the realization you already know what I said. It's called consciousness of consciousness. Right. It is the Akashic records. A young girl, an infant child, is born with every cell, every egg that she will produce in her life. She's born with that. And all she does as she lives her life is goes through her monthly cycle. That's how I feel about information. Every human is born with every bit of information that has ever existed, that exists, and that will exist one day. And if you have the proper people that come into your life that allow you to understand that fundamental principle, and if you understand that you know all things, all you got to do is find a light switch in your mind and turn it on and you will see it. It's a different dynamic as it relates to when you step out into the world and you start to deal with life. You know you got it. Like the young brothers say, like the sisters say, I got game. I got game. And when they walk on that basketball court, they know they got game. You can tell by the way they bouncing that ball that they know they got something going on. Well, that's how I want you to do it when you go into a classroom.
Wow.
I got game. Ain't nothing you gonna say I can't handle.
That's right. Speaking of a light switch, you know, we don't have Kaba in every classroom teaching. We don't have principals and administrators with your mindset. Many of our children don't have the light switch. They're not even in the room near the switch. And there are a lot of variables for why. What would you tell a young teacher getting into this field of education now, especially a young teacher of color, working with students of color, you know, our young African students all over the diaspora? What skills and what things do they need to propel our children and help them evolve?
Play the game. Play the game. Don't break your principle, but there are times you may have to bend it. I'll give you an example. One time I was teaching a fifth grade class, and I was talking about the Neteru. I was talking about the Neteru of ancient Kush Kemet, about the different symbols, Heru, Asar, Tehuti, you know. And I was explaining to them the symbol of the Neter, which is looks like a pennant, you know. It's like a triangle on a stick. That's where flags come from. Neteru became heraldic representatives of the psycho-social world of African people. And I was teaching them about symbolism and the symbolic and the symbolique. I was explaining to them, and they was getting into it, and they were telling me different symbols and things like that. And I would say, what do you think when you see the heart? And I would start telling them how it was represented in Africa. What do you think of the sun? And I would explain to them. And then all of a sudden, the State Department came into my room to observe me. And I immediately started talking about the American flag, which was right above me. And I began, because they saw the pennant and they saw symbol, and we had an American flag. So I began immediately to talk about the American flag and what it represents. And the students said, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and all the rest. You know, they was getting all up in that, right? And what happened is that the person that was observing said, this is a very interesting class. But you need to bring the level of the information to another level, because you're talking to fifth graders. He was so blind to what I had just done. He had no idea what I did. He had no idea I was talking about Africa before he stepped in the room.
Right.
But you play the game, brother, because if he knew what I was doing, he would have put me up on something.
Yeah. Right.
He would have charged me with things. And when I say charge, I don't mean anything serious. I mean, he would have written me up as somebody that was not teaching so-called standards.
Right.
His problem wasn't that I wasn't teaching standards. He felt that the concept of symbolism and flag in a fifth grade class was beneath their knowledge level, not realizing I had gone deep into some psychosocial African themes.
And on another level, the way children are taught in this system is linear.
Yes.
We teach holistic because we are holistic people.
That's right.
When we do art, we don't just draw, we dance, we sing, we drum. When we teach, that's what we do. That's what you did. When you created that room, that majestic room, you put it all together.
That's it.
And it's changed my life as an educator, and I know it changed every child that went in there. So I just want to say again, thank you, brother, for what you have brought to this universe. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to just remind folks again what's coming up, where they can find information about you, websites and so forth, so that they can further their light.
Okay, no doubt. Well, you can go to my website, www.kabakamene.com, KABAKAMENE.com. You can download my free 6-day e-course and my study guide. The study guide came from my experiences with the beginnings of Hidden Colors. I had a lot of young people that came out of the movie or maybe saw me in the street and recognized me. And they say, brother, you know, like it was on World Star Hip Hop. And like when Tariq put that on World Star Hip Hop and I follow his thing, you know, Mac Daddy, I thought it was going to be like Drake and, you know, Lil Kim. I thought it was going to be hip hop. You know, you dropped some knowledge I had no idea about. He said, can you give me a book? And enough of them came to me that I realized that for some people, such as yourself, Brother Artman, who knows this information, has been around, you didn't learn anything new in Hidden Colors, but it was nice to see it the way Tariq presented.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You know, the imagery and everything was good to see it. It was good, but you didn't learn anything. But for a lot of young people, it blew their minds.
Yes.
They had no idea about Africans in America, Africans in Asia, the Moors. They had no idea what was going on like that. So they were looking for information. And I came to realize that while it was a good thing, if it's overwhelming, too much of a good thing ain't that great. So what I did is I went home, I shut down for 2 weeks, and I put together an outline of all of my life's work. It's a 44-page study guide that is free on my website. Because Dr. Clark used to always tell me, on your journey in life, realize you may not get to your destination, but if you create the proper roadmap, those that come behind you will. And I thought about that because I realized that I wanted to put something together that no matter what may happen, I plan on living Methuselah's life now. I ain't planning on going no place. But if by chance the creator and ancestors should call me back to the waters of Nun early, I want to at least leave something that the community knows where I was headed. Right. The study guide is it, and it's free. It's probably the most important piece of work I've done. That's why it's free.
And can you just say the website again one more time?
www.kabakamene.com.
It's very important to leave the foundations of our lives.
That's it.
For our children and for the children of our children and future generations. You know, I was in an art show one time and an older African-American man came up to me and he looked at my work. He said, you know what you're doing, brother? I said, no, please tell me, I'm not sure. He said, you leaving your story for your great-great-great-grandkids who will never meet you, but now they have. So you have left so many stories for us You know, whether it's in Hidden Colors, Out of Darkness, whether it's in the books you have written and are going to write, the lectures, the classes you've taught. You left so many stories for us, and there are more to come, brother. We've worked on one together, and that's going to come out soon. I want to thank you again for blessing us and bringing your light to step into the light. This is not the end. We're coming back again with you soon. This is just part one. We can't get it all done in one time, but thank you again, brother, for being here and blessing us.
I appreciate you. And you can go to Amazon if you're interested in my book, Spirituality Before Religions.
Thank you. And to everyone, thanks for joining us. And as we always say, stay in the light, brothers and sisters.
In the light.
Soon. Stay in the light.